General Murray, Secretary of Defense Austin has made it clear that the PRC is the top priority, that it is the pacing threat for our nation's defense. But many suggest that the primary warfighting roles in the Pacific belong to the Navy and the Air Force. What role does the Army play in the Pacific, and how does Army modernization support the Army's ability to play that role?
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. And obviously, I have a pretty strong opinion on the Army's role, not only in the Pacific, but any place the Joint Force goes. And I would just start by saying is, your military never fights as a single service. We always fight as a joint force. The Army's role, I believe, in Indo-PACOM specifically spans the spectrum you talked about, from competition through crisis and into conflict. And I think we have an especially important role to play in terms of deterrence. I mentioned the Security Force Assistance Brigades and the ability to build partners and partner capacity up front. The partnerships with countries, with your United States Army, with countries throughout Indo-PACOM is very strong, and it gets stronger. As the Secretary mentioned this morning, the chiefs of defense in many of those countries are land force commanders in those partnerships, and General McConville has been very engaged and proactive in strengthening those partnerships throughout Indo-PACOM. I would say from one aspect in particular is the joint service and all joint services, in order to operate, depend upon the Army for logistics support. So that is a strong role no matter what phase of the operation you're in, is logistics support. And then specifically as it relates to the modernization priorities, obviously long-range precision fires. When we started the concept called multi-domain operations, it was based upon the premise that the Army could use long-range fires to begin to break down what we call anti-access aerial denial strategies, and really enable the joint force and really enable joint fires operating as a joint force. And then, of course, multi-domain task force brings together not only lethal capabilities, but also electronic warfare, cyber, intelligence capabilities that are useful in competition through crisis and into conflict. And then I would just lastly add that we're already there. So last time I checked, South Korea and Japan were part of the Indo-PACOM AR, and we have sizable populations in those two locations.
Thank you. I actually just returned from South Korea, where I met with General Abrams and had a very, very productive visit. I understand that the Joint Staff is working on a new joint warfighting concept. DoD just released a new joint all-domain command and control strategy. You've already referenced this. And as the Airland Subcommittee, we are also paying careful attention to the Air Force's work on their advanced battle management system. How do the Army's modernization efforts, including Project Convergence, support these broader joint efforts?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you again for that question. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we believe multi-domain operations, as we turn this into doctrine, is not only our contribution to the joint warfighting concept, but it actually will become a part of it. We're helping to inform that exercise, and that's from a concept standpoint. And then from a Project Convergence standpoint, last year we executed Project Convergence, and it was an Army only because we pulled it together pretty quickly. This year, beginning in December, we formed at the 3-star level a joint board of directors that includes not only all 4 and now 5 services, because the Space Force has now joined us, but also the Joint Staff J6, who is responsible for the JADC2 concept at the Joint Staff level, and the Joint Staff J7, who's responsible for the Joint Warfighting concept. Those 2 responsibilities, nobody's trying to take that away from the Joint Staff or the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. What we're trying to do is come together as the services and begin to inform not only the concept of JADC2, but the concept of joint warfighting from the bottom up. And so the services working together, meeting someplace in the middle with the top-down work the Joint Staff is doing, we believe is the best way to come up with a viable joint warfighting concept and a viable concept for joint all-domain command and control.
General Peterson, the President's defense budget request for FY22 put some pressure on the Army top line, and Army leadership has testified about the need to make tough choices. You were saying you're into the excruciating choices level at this point. What does that mean for the Army's ability to protect its 31+4 signature modernization efforts?
Thank you, Chair Duckworth. The 22 budget request does, in fact, protect our 31+4. We have continued our deep dive process, formerly known as Night Court, to realign resources to ensure that we retain and, in some cases, accelerate momentum with the 31+4. But it is challenging. These are tough choices with respect to the resourcing and funding of enduring and legacy systems, and we work very, very closely to assess that risk and ensure that it's manageable. During our process for FY22, we gleaned a realignment of $1.6 billion through our very, very excruciating, continued, rigorous realignment of funding in order to continue to support those modernization priorities.
Thank you.